Hello everyone, this is Sebastian and welcome back to the 5th episode of the Storytelling Podcast here on KWDC 93.5 LPFM Delta College Radio. Welcome back to the Storytelling Podcast, where I teach you about storytelling through my perspective. I'm really glad to be here and even more glad to have all of you listening to this next episode. Last time we were on here, we spoke about what makes a story good, the elements that pulls us in and keeps us invested into the story that we're venturing into. Well, today we're flipping the script and exploring the other side of that coin with what makes a story bad. So sit back, relax, and let's just jump straight into this. To understand what makes a story bad, it's important to recognize how easily a narrative can fall apart when its core elements don't work together. Even in the strongest of ideas, it can be undermined by weak execution, poor structure, or a lack of emotional investment. And the following points break down some of those that are most common as issues for bad storytelling. The first thing that we have to note to what makes a story bad is boring or inconsistent characters. When characters lack depth or behave unpredictably without explanation, it becomes difficult for the audience to connect with them. Without any clear motivations, consistencies in their personalities, or meaningful growth, characters begin to feel hollow. They can make their choices and emotional moments lose impact and credibility. So some things to keep in mind for boring and inconsistent characters of what not to do or to avoid. Characters that have no clear personality or motivation, character decisions contradicting establishing traits to the characters, little to no character growth or development for your characters in a story, and emotional reactions that feel unnatural or forced can really make the characters in your story take a dip. To give you an example of boring or inconsistent characters, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Character motivations in that movie shift abruptly, especially when it comes to Rey and Kylo Ren. Now, for what makes both of them an inconsistent character, I'm going to start with Kylo Ren. In that movie specifically, he goes from starting as the villain to being the hero in a way, but there's not really a good payoff or setup for that said character. If anything, it just felt forced to the audience of that movie and to the entire Star Wars fan base in general. And in the case with Rey, something that's inconsistent with her is her suddenly falling for Kylo Ren towards the end of the movie. That did not need to happen. The relationship that I and most other people had seen was mostly a thing of just respect. It wasn't like a love interest thing until they tried to force it in. When characters feel hollow or inconsistent, it becomes even harder for the audience to understand what they're fighting for or why it should matter at all. Which brings me to my next point. Our second identifiable trait of a bad story is no clear goals or stakes. If the audience doesn't know what the characters want or why it matters, the story feels directionless. Without clear goals and meaningful stakes, scenes lack urgency and tension, leaving viewers or readers with no reason to stay emotionally invested at all in what they're watching or reading. Some things to keep in mind with no clear goals or stakes. The main objective is unclear or constantly changing within a story. Failure has no meaning or consequences in the story that you're viewing or reading. Conflicts can feel unimportant or be easily ignored by the audience. If all of those things are present in a bad story, the audience will often have no reason to stay invested in the stories that they're viewing or reading. To give you some examples, the first example I'm going to give is of a movie, specifically Justice League 2017. The villain in that film, specifically Steppenwolf, is a vague villain who doesn't have really any clear goals or stakes given to the characters, that being the Justice League. He's just kind of there, and he's not really that important. I mean, he's different in the Snyder Cut, obviously, but in the theatrical cut of Justice League, or Justice League, it just wasn't it. For a TV show example, The Walking Dead, specifically in later seasons, the repetitive survival arcs with little to no progression in said stories or characters can often feel like a waste of time because the audience has obviously seen this before. And then for a book example, within Ready Player 2, goals in that book feel forced and less meaningful than the original story that came before it. And keep in mind, without clear goals and stakes, conflict loses its weight, turning challenges into empty obstacles rather than meaningful struggles. Speaking of which, the third thing to identify a bad story is weak or confusing conflict. Conflict is the engine of a story, and without it, tension disappears. When challenges fail to push the characters, escalate, or create meaningful obstacles, the narrative often loses its momentum and quickly becomes dull or predictable to the audience. Some things to identify within weak or confusing conflict. The central conflict is poorly defined. The antagonistic forces lack purpose or presence within the story. Problems are solved really easily, and conflicts don't escalate or evolve past a certain point. Some examples that I can give. For a movie example, Wonder Woman 1984, in that film, the villain, specifically Cheetah, her motivations and stakes are very unclear and don't really add up with what was established beforehand. There's not a lot that is explained in the movie as to why she turns to essentially a villain. And then in the TV show Obi-Wan Kenobi, there are repeated confrontations with little to no consequences for any of the main characters. This goes for Darth Vader, Obi-Wan, and any one of the wannabe Sith people. When conflict lacks clarity or escalation, pacing often suffers, leaving the story either spinning its wheels or rushing past moments that should matter within the story. Moving on from that, we have bad pacing in a story. Poor pacing disrupts engagement and emotional impact. When a story drags on unimportant moments or rushes through critical scenes, it prevents the audience from fully connecting with the characters and the weight of the events that are currently unfolding in a story. Some things to keep in mind to avoid bad pacing in your story. You cannot have scenes drag out without advancing the story. You can't have important moments that are rushed or gloss over in a story. You cannot have a lot of filler in between major events, and you absolutely cannot have inconsistent rhythm throughout the narrative of that said story that you are telling. To give you some examples, the movie Batman vs. Superman, it doesn't really matter which cut you're watching. There are scenes that feel rushed, and setup can be mixed with overly long exposition throughout the film. A TV show example could be The Flash, specifically the later seasons. They really stretch the plots with repetitive filler that you've seen throughout the show's history since the first season, but you see it more in the later seasons because you can just tell where they're repeating everything that you pretty much already know. And then a book example that I can give is The Fellowship of the Rings. Early sections are often criticized for having very long and dragged out scenes that could either be cut down or removed entirely. Now, as pacing often breaks down in a story, logic is the thing that often follows, creating gaps and contradictions that pull the audience out of the story entirely. Which brings me to my fifth point on what makes a story bad: plot holes and illogical events. Logical inconsistencies break down the immersion and trust that you're trying to put into the story. When a story contradicts its own rules or relies on illogical events, the audience becomes aware of the storytelling flaws and is pulled out of the experience entirely. Some things to keep in mind on how to identify plot holes or illogical events. Events will often occur without cause or explanation. The established rules are ignored or contradicted all throughout the story. Characters can gain the ability or knowledge of unrealistic things that weren't identifiable before, and coincidences that are placed throughout the story can really replace meaningful storytelling. To give you some examples, the Rise of Skywalker, unexplained force abilities can create plot conveniences. Now, what I mean by what happens in those movies, Rey has the ability to heal people through the force, which wasn't something that was widely established before in any of the Star Wars movies. It was established in The Mandalorian Season 1 through Baby Yoda, but other than that, there wasn't really anything to let people know, oh, that's an ability that can happen. And that's not the only ability that you can see her use in that said movie. Her and Kylo have a force connection thing where they end up having a lightsaber fight through the force so that they can see each other. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense as to why that's an ability. Then a book example that I can give is Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. The time travel inconsistencies that are shown within that story often contradict the stories that came before for Harry Potter's universe. Now, this could also be something that the movies or even the future TV show also have a problem with. but I'm personally not going to watch that TV show, so I cannot comment on that. To patch over these logical gaps, stories often resort to sudden, convenient solutions that replace cause and effect with shortcuts. I, of course, am making reference to the overuse of the Deus Ex Machina. My sixth point being the overuse of the Deus Ex Machina. The sudden solutions undermine the tension and the payoffs. When problems are resolved by convenient, unexplained events, victories often feel unearned, and the emotional buildup leading to those moments can feel very wasted. Some things to keep in mind to identify the overuse of the Deus Ex Machina. Problems are often solved by unexplained forces that aren't established in the story. Characters are saved without effort or even sacrifice. Conflicts end abruptly with no build-up to that said conflict, and outcomes feel unearned or artificial in a way, almost like AI could have written it. To give you a few examples, let's start with the one that I would say is probably from the worst story that I've seen out of these three. War of the Worlds, 2005 specifically. You probably thought I was going to talk about the 2025 movie, but no, that one has its own separate issues. Specifically in this movie, conflict resolves by external forces. It's not really by the characters that we're following in this specific story. So sadly, it's not like how Ice Cube ended up doing everything through Amazon. A TV show example I can give is Doctor Who. Not specifically a season, but more like certain episodes throughout the entirety of the show. There are last-minute solutions without any build-up in a lot of episodes where it could feel very repetitive for some of the audience members, but it could also confuse them in a way because, well, there was no build-up to that said, last-minute solution. Then finally, a book example that I can give is the Da Vinci Code. There can often be a lot of frequent, convenient discoveries that happen where there was no build-up there to begin with. When easy fixes become the norm, storytelling shifts from earned movements to explanations relying on telling the audience rather than letting events speak for themselves. Thank you for joining us on the 5th episode of the Storytelling Podcast on What Makes a Story Bad, here on Delta College. We are going to take a quick break, but we will be right back here on 93.5 KWDC.
Don't let biased algorithms, or degree screens, or exclusive professional networks, or stereotypes. Don't let anything keep you from discovering the half of the workforce who are stars. Workers skilled through alternative routes rather than a bachelor's degree. It's time to tear the paper ceiling and see the stars beyond it. Find out how you can make stars part of your talent strategy at tearthepaperceiling.org. Brought to you by Opportunity at Work and the Ad Council.
Hey everyone, I hope you had a good little break there, and let's get back on to the Storytelling Podcast with What Makes a Story Bad. We last left off on the Deus Ex Machina subject, but now we're going to move on into the 7th thing to identify how you can tell a story is a bad story, and that is telling instead of showing. There have been people in the past that have said that it's better to tell instead of show, however, I really disagree. An example that I can give of showing instead of telling would be Thanos and Avengers Infinity War, specifically the opening scene where he gets the Space Stone. That is the opening to establish the threat of Thanos, and it would be better than just cutting to Bruce Banner being like, oh yeah, I got attacked with Thor, and Thanos, this guy, he's coming. You wouldn't be interested in knowing that if you didn't know the threat of Thanos himself. But getting back onto this, for telling instead of showing, over-explaining weakens emotional engagement within the story. When a story tells the audience exactly what to think or even what to feel, instead of letting actions and consequences speak for themselves, can really rob moments of subtlety and emotional power. Some of the things to identify telling instead of showing in a story is excessive exposition or information dumps given by more than one character throughout any of the stories that you're viewing or reading. Characters state emotion instead of expressing them. Backstory is explained rather than revealed naturally throughout the story, and dialogue only exists to inform the audience of what's currently happening in that said story. Some examples that I can give is 2016 Suicide Squad movie. There are heavy exposition scenes instead of organic character moments that should be happening between each of the characters. A TV show example I can give is The Big Bang Theory. Characters often explain jokes or emotions directly. Now, it might work with it being here and there, but when it's a constant thing, specifically so that they can explain a joke to one of the main characters, his name is Sheldon, it can get rather repetitive at times. And then a book series that I can give is Twilight. There are emotions that are often stated rather than demonstrated throughout those books, and it could really just bring the reading experience way down. This over-reliance on exposition often exposes deeper issues within the world itself, where rules and systems are no longer holding the stories together. Bringing me to the 8th point, inconsistent world building. I did an entire episode on world building back in last semester, so I'm not going to touch upon what I was saying there because that's how to world build, so we're going to say what the opposite of that would be. A story's world needs to be clear. Stable rules have to exist to make the world feel real. When those rules constantly change or are ignored for convenience, the setting can often lose credibility and the audience stops taking in the story as a serious story and starts seeing it as just a complete joke. So for some little things to keep in mind for inconsistent world building, rules can change to serve the plot of whatever story is being told at the time. Power systems can lack limits or structure to the overarching story of everything around it. Technology or magic can behave inconsistently with not just one another, but to the story as a whole, with either the characters or the people around the characters. And the setting can often feel shallow or underdeveloped. So to give you some examples, a movie that I can give is the Fantastic Beasts series. Contradictions to establish Harry Potter's lore can really feel drawn out and make what came after that, or what is supposed to come after that, less important or just confusing to the audience. And then a book series that I can give is the Percy Jackson series, specifically the later entries. Mythological rules becomes inconsistent with the books that came before that. Once the world often loses its credibility, the themes often suffer too, becoming muddled or overly blunt instead of naturally woven into the story. Now, for the 9th thing that you can use to identify a bad story, themes that are preachy or unclear to your set audience. Themes should emerge through stories, not just lectures. When messages are forced through heavy-handed dialogue or narration, they can feel unnatural and distract from the narrative instead of enhancing them. So some things to keep in mind to identify themes that are preachy or unclear. Messages are forced through dialogue or narration. The story talks at the audience instead of trusting them. Conflicting themes create confusion within your audience, and messages feel disconnected from the plot itself. Some examples that I can give for a movie, Crash 2004, there's often criticized for blunt surface level messaging. For the TV show 13 Reasons Why, themes are handled in confusing or very harmful ways. I'm not going to say what happens in that show, but if you have seen that show and you know these characters, you pretty much understand what I'm talking about. And then for a book example, Atlas Shrugged. That one's often criticized for prioritizing ideology over story. Now, when these themes aren't earned through narrative action, the ending often lacks meaningful consequences or emotional payoff. So let's finally get into the final thing that you can use to identify a bad story. No consequences or payoff. Without having any lasting impacts, a story can feel very empty. When actions have no real consequences and nothing meaningful changes by the end of the story, the journey often feels pointless and the audience is often left unsatisfied and wanting more with something that they should have had in the first place. Now, to give you an idea of how to identify no consequences or payoffs within your story, character actions do not affect the world at all. You can have like a villain who does something and you're supposed to have it be a big deal, but there's nothing there for it to affect the world. Another thing to keep in mind, losses are reversed with no cost at all. Usually when you're going to reverse something, there's always going to be consequences, and if you have no consequences in that, it will really hurt the story. An example of it being beneficial for a story to have consequences. The Avengers time traveling in Avengers Endgame. They go back in time, get the stones, mission accomplished, but oh wait, we have Thanos from 2014. Like, that's a good example of a consequence that none of them saw coming. Another thing to keep in mind, the ending can ignore earlier setup. This is something apparently that people have criticized the Transformers movies for, but I've never personally seen it myself, so I'm not going to delve too deeply into that one. They do have movies other than Transformers that are obvious when it comes to endings ignoring the earlier setup. And then the final thing you can identify or can use to identify no consequences or payoff in a story, the journey can often lack a satisfying conclusion. I know some people are probably thinking, oh yeah, Stranger Things did that, but it's like, no, it didn't. One that did it would definitely have to be Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. To give you some movie examples, X-Men: The Last Stand. Major events often feel reversed or ignored by the end of that film. A TV show example that I can give is Game of Thrones, specifically the finale. There's a lack of payoff for very long-term storytelling that happened in that show. Long-term arcs that happen in that show. And then a book series that I can give is the final Maze Runner book. There are unresolved questions that weaken the conclusion by the time you reach the final page because you just wish you had the answers to that said story. Without lasting impact or resolution, the entire journey feels hollow, leaving the audience questioning whether the story was worth it or whether it wasn't worth it for the investment that they were trying to give the entire time. So to recap with all 10 of the topics that I have discussed that you can use to identify what makes a story bad, boring or inconsistent characters can weaken a story by making it difficult for the audience to connect with or believe in the people driving the plot. No clear goals or stakes can cause a story to feel directionless because the audience doesn't understand what the characters are trying to achieve or what they are trying to lose or what they're losing in general. Weak or confusing conflict reduces tension and engagement by failing to present a strong, understandable struggle. Bad pacing disrupts the flow of a story by moving events too quickly or too slowly for proper impact. Plot holes or illogical events break immersions by contradicting the story's established rules or logic. The overuse of the Deus Ex Machina undermines satisfaction by resolving major problems with sudden, unearned solutions. Telling instead of showing can really distance the audience from the experience by explaining emotions or events rather than demonstrating them. Inconsistent world building can really weaken the foundation of a story by a changing rule or setting without any explanation. Themes that are preachy or unclear either feel forced and heavy-handed or leave the story lacking meaningful direction. And then finally, no consequences or payoff make a story feel empty by failing to give the actions weight or provide satisfying resolution. Now, I would like to give you an example of what I think is a very bad story, which is still the worst movie that I've ever seen. Faint Four Stick 2015. So, does it have the boring and inconsistent characters? Yes. Is there no clear goal or stakes? Yeah, there isn't a goal or a stake in the movie at all. It's just more like a checklist of stuff that happens in the movie. The conflict in the film is very weak and very confusing. Especially when it comes to Reed Richards and Doctor Doom. There's like no setup with Doctor Doom at all in this movie. There is very bad pacing where sometimes it feels like it's on the fast forward button when you're in the middle, and then for the ending and the beginning, it feels more like you're just watching everything in slow motion as you just watch the hour tick by, and then you realize, oh wait, this movie was not even like 2 hours. It just felt like 5. There are some plot holes and illogical events that happen in the thing, specifically with the negative zone and that entire universe thing that they use. Overuse of the Deus Ex Machina, yeah, you can say that the team coming together was just like the classic trope that obviously was going to be used regardless, but it was just done so lazily in this specific film. They do a lot of telling instead of showing. They talk too much about the negative zone. They don't really go to it, and then when they do go to it, it's like it just looks like a random desert that's in a stormy night, I guess. There's not really some world building there either. It's like you know what the movie's supposed to be because of the title, but like they don't ever do anything that's based off the comics. There are a few themes that are preachy and unclear, mainly with the Thing and how like he's different, he's a rock, but it just comes off more as like racism than anything. And like them using him as weapons. And then obviously there's no consequences or payoff in that said movie. The Doctor Doom thing is not well established at the beginning, so we don't really even get a payoff with him. So he's just there one moment and then he dies. Then they don't even have like a proper thing of where they're gonna be to like do all their little experiments with their powers after the day is supposedly saved, despite there being a giant crater in the earth now. I want to make it clear, I've only seen this movie once, and the fact that I still remember it hurts my brain really bad. So now that we're coming to the end of this little segment, that's pretty much it for how to tell if a story is bad through my perspective and what makes a story bad through my perspective. It was a really good talk that I had with you all. Now we're going to move on into the guest segment. This part is going to be a little long, but before that, thank you for joining us on the 5th episode of the Storytelling Podcast on What Makes a Story Bad here on Delta College. We are going to take a quick break, but we will be right back here on 93.5 KWDC.
Talking to your kids about the dangers of vaping can be hard. Getting them to listen to hot gossip is easy. So here's some drama you could share with your kid. Dude, did you hear about Cassie and Jake? No, but did you hear that vaping can cause irreversible lung damage and nicotine affects brain development? Nuh-uh. You don't need to gossip if you want to have an open conversation about vaping. So if you want to get tips on when and how to talk to your kids, visit talkaboutvaping.org. Brought to you by the American Lung Association and the Ad Council.
Hope you had a good little break there, everyone, and welcome back to the Storytelling Podcast. So let's continue.
Hi, my name is Ian. I'm the guest speaker for this episode.
For What Makes a Story Bad, and what are we talking about right now, Ian?
Right now we're going to be talking about the Star Wars trilogies. Each trilogy sort of has its own sort of vibe and its own sort of quality level.
The main topic that we're going to discuss is specifically what made the sequel trilogy bad in comparison to the other two.
Yeah, exactly. I think they do definitely vary in terms of the quality level of each film in this sequel trilogy specifically. I think it actually started out very strong with The Force Awakens, and then Last Jedi. It's very clear that they didn't have a plan from the get-go. So when it came to maybe exploring some of the more riskier elements of the story, I think The Last Jedi kind of fell flat completely in that. And then The Rise of Skywalker...
I feel like they tried to course correct with The Rise of Skywalker, where it was like, oh, we don't want to address what happened in The Last Jedi because we knew it was bad, but we don't know what to do anymore, so that's why we made the choices in these films, or in the last film at least.
Absolutely, and I felt maybe one aspect of just the whole trilogy, movie after movie, was that it felt reactionary. Like every time a movie came out, when you're watching the next one, it feels like, oh, well, they're definitely responding to how fans took this element of the last movie, trying to either retcon or just explore it more, and it just kind of made it like feel, well, didn't they say this in the last movie? And it kind of doesn't make sense. Even if you didn't particularly enjoy the choices that they made movie after movie, it just kind of felt strange when they're like, yeah, let's just forget about that because people didn't like that, so let's just kind of forget that ever happened.
Yeah, a good example would be specifically in The Last Jedi. Kylo Ren had basically said what his thoughts were on Rey's parents, and then we actually get the reveal of who Rey's parents kind of actually were in The Rise of Skywalker, which son of Palpatine, which was just a defective clone apparently.
Yeah, and that's probably the biggest thing that was really upsetting to me the last time I watched this movie, is he said, your parents were nobodies, they were junk traders sitting in a pauper's grave on Jakku, and then...
sold their daughter off for drinking money.
Yeah, and he's being completely genuine when he's saying that, completely serious, and then in the next movie come to find out, oh, that's actually a complete lie, not true at all, you're a Palpatine, and that just kind of seemed like it came out of nowhere, like it, it did. There was no plan from the get-go that Rey was supposed to be a Palpatine. They just kind of had to figure something out for that last movie.
Yeah, okay, so to start this off properly, let's I say for all these trilogies, because we have the original, the prequel, and then the sequel, let's divide these all into like 3 parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end for each. So for this first part, let's talk about A New Hope, The Phantom Menace, and Force Awakens, and how they all compare to each other.
Yeah, I think the introduction to A New Hope, or as I like to call it, just Star Wars, because that's how it originally released.
It was just the original Star Wars. I don't really call it The New Hope. I just call it Star Wars.
Yeah, I think the beginning of this movie is pretty much picture perfect. You have that, the 10-4 being chased down by that gigantic Star Destroyer. You see the space battle going on. You can tell that there's definitely a difference in the power of the Empire and then this small brand of rebels trying to get away from them. It just sets up the story perfectly. And then you have these droids bickering, kind of these droids that you will see for the entire the franchise. As George Lucas has said, the Skywalker saga is sort of seen through the lens of R2-D2 and C-3PO, since they're kind of the anchor points of every movie. And I just feel like the way this one starts out, it sets up everything that the series is about perfectly.
And something good about this, the first Star Wars movie, is it has the classic hero's adventure, specifically with Luke, which it might not be that surprising nowadays for like a story like that, but like back in the 70s, that was like, it's like, oh, this is actually really told very well. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most perfect tellings in modern times of the hero's journey. In the way that it is told, it's and I mean, there's a reason why it's studied in storytelling classes and whatnot, probably until the end of time, because it inspired so much of what came to be known as the hero's journey as itself too.
And other stories have somewhat tried to replicate it. I mean, like, I would say, like, yes, the first Harry Potter movie, or just Harry Potter in general, would be considered a classic hero's journey too. Iron Man 2, Iron Man as a character, his first movie, his was really clear as a hero's journey because he's a superhero and all. But moving on from the New Hope, we have the Phantom Menace, which is supposed to be the big beginning, the real beginning of this entire adventure, which is supposed to lead into the original trilogy.
The very beginning of the Phantom Menace, it's not something that I really think back to when I'm thinking about the best Star Wars moments. The Phantom Menace in itself does have some excellent moments. I do think the pod racing scene, as everyone mentions, is absolutely amazing, exhilarating to watch, especially in a theater, as I did see it for its 25th anniversary a couple years ago. And the battle with Darth Maul, the lightsaber duel, is one of the best lightsaber duels in the entire franchise.
I feel like, specifically with Darth Maul, I feel like the common complaint that I see specifically with this film is that we didn't really get enough of him in the film.
Absolutely. And I do think that kind of ties into, the sort of issue with villains in these franchises either dying off too early or, not really getting their due in the movies. Darth Maul, of course, spoiler alert, would come back in further stories and whatnot, but him dying immediately in this first movie after only having a few minutes of screen time, only a couple lines, it definitely does feel like a bit of a missed opportunity, and that would be one of my biggest complaints.
And like, when you compare it to Darth Vader in the very first movie, New Hope, it's like a night and day difference, where it's like no one went into the first Star Wars movie knowing who Darth Vader was. We were learning everything as that movie was going along for the first time watching it, and we had the prior knowledge to who Darth Vader was, but we didn't know who Darth Maul was in The Phantom Menace, so it was just asking multiple questions as to what was happening.
Absolutely. And then in terms of other complaints for this movie, which there are many from a lot of people on the internet, specifically if you look online, there's endless discourse about this movie, but there's the kind of some acting moments that maybe aren't the greatest. It's not a huge issue with every character. Like I think Obi-Wan, Ewan McGregor is absolutely impeccable almost. But there are some goofier moments with characters like Jar Jar Binks, perhaps, which I don't think is as big of an issue as other people do. But some people, anytime he's on screen, they just want to turn the movie off.
I mean, he's great meme potential, but like that's pretty much all he's been used for.
Yeah, absolutely. And like when he steps in the poo or whatever in episode 1, that's one of my least favorite moments.
Yeah. But moving on from these 2 episodes, we do have another beginning, the third beginning, The Force Awakens.
This is actually very big event in my, in my lifetime, a new Star Wars movie. I don't know if you had that same sort of experience.
I didn't have that experience because I didn't officially sit down to watch any of the Star Wars movies until before The Last Jedi was going to come out. But I did have friends at the time who were hyped up about the new Star Wars movie. So, like, I got to see it, like, firsthand from an actual fan as a non-fan. And it's like, okay, yeah, this is something special for you. But I didn't have that for Force Awakens. But, I mean, I did see Force Awakens later on. I did like the film. But, so what did you think of, like, the story itself?
So going into it, I was kind of, very hesitant, honestly, going into the theater because I had just rewatched the prequel and the original trilogy beforehand, sort of realizing the prequel trilogy's faults that people bring up a lot. And I was like, well, I don't really know how this is going to go. I was definitely in the mood for something more, in the vein of the original trilogy. And then immediately after the movie premiered, I had already seen a lot of complaints, some people saying, oh, this movie is either, it doesn't stray too far from the original trilogy, like some of the story beats are the same. So overall, I just had a lot of hesitation going into this movie. But pretty much as soon as it started and things started actually moving, with that opening scene with Poe Dameron in the village and the stormtroopers, Kylo Ren, seeing all that get set up, it's actually set up very well.
I mean, with specifically with Kylo Ren, when I had seen that the first time, even as like a young person at the time, I want to say I was like 11 or 12 at the time. When I had seen like that opening scene, it's like, okay, this is good. You actually established the villains properly in this thing.
Yeah, and I feel it's important to mention I was also 11 years old when this came out in December 2015. So I think that's a very common age for people to be like, oh yeah, my generation Star Wars came out when I was this age. So it's like the right age to get into a brand new Star Wars trilogy. But that's just how it starts.
I get the complaints of Force Awakens. I understand the complaints of how it feels like the original trilogy. I could very easily say, okay, this is just New Hope, just reskinned. You have the Death Star, you have the death of an old character, which would be Han Solo in this case. Yeah. When it's like you looked back in A New Hope and it's like, oh yeah, it was Obi-Wan in that movie. Here it's Han Solo.
Yeah, like sort of the mentor that
And you have that mentor aspect because his son is Ben Solo.
Yeah.
Kylo Ren. Or at least that's his birth name.
Yeah. I thought the whole Death Star thing, the Starkiller base, it's not exactly the same as the Death Star, but it is kind of like incredible that they would reuse that sort of idea again.
I'm just curious to know how they managed to get one the size of an actual planet in the time jump from the original trilogy to this trilogy.
I think my understanding of it is that they actually built the space station into a planet. And then it took about 50 years total time for them to build the station. And it has a hyperdrive so it can move around from area to area and whatnot.
I was going to say, because the time jump between the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy, that's only supposed to be, I want to say, like 20 to 30 years of a time jump. So it's like, does Darth Vader know that this was happening, like, while he was ruling the galaxy with Palpatine for a certain amount of years?
Yeah, I think this was a Palpatine creation, although I'm not entirely sure because it gets really complicated when you start after going into the comics and books and whatnot. That's one complaint I do have about the sequel trilogy. I feel like a lot of the main story beats aren't really explained super well. You have to dig deep into the comics to sort of look for the explanations that should have been in the films. I think, especially with like the Rise of Skywalker, when somehow Palpatine returned.
Palpatine returned.
You're like, really? How did Palpatine return? Well, you can find out if you read this comic,
Yeah. But moving on from the first chapters, we're now in the middle chapters. So let's start with the one by order of release, I guess. Empire Strikes Back, which I consider to be the best of the original trilogy, in my opinion.
I honestly think The Empire Strikes Back might be my favorite Star Wars film of them all. I think Empire Strikes Back is a brilliant film. It starts out with, actually a very similar theme that we do see a lot in the sequel trilogy. Our rebels are kind of wiped out in a bit. They're going through a bit of a rough period and they need to evacuate because they've been found out. And this whole opening sequence actually takes up a good chunk of the movie. But a lot of interesting, exciting
ice
things
planet.
happen. Yeah, we got Luke Skywalker like adventuring out and then getting attacked by a Wampa, having to use the Force and interacting with Obi-Wan, telling him to go to Dagobah to get his training.
We get to meet Yoda for the first time.
Yeah, I think Cloud City is probably my favorite sequence from this movie when our heroes are trying to evade a bounty hunter. So they stop for some repairs in Cloud City. We meet Lando Calrissian, one of my favorite characters of the original trilogy. And yeah, this is where the movie sort of takes a darker turn after Luke is going through his training and comes back to save his friends, finds out that he's kind of too late, and sort of gets himself into a fight with Darth Vader. And
I would say the best part of this movie, and I don't know if this is true or not, I'm just going off speculation, but apparently when they were filming this movie, they had the actor say, "Luke, I killed your father," and then in the recut, when they were editing the film, they changed it to the twist reveal where it was like, "Oh, hey, I'm your father, Luke."
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things about this movie that I don't really have, firsthand experience, is how big that twist would have been, originally seeing it in the theater, like, early on. My dad was, I think, 5 years old when this movie came out, and he saw the actual, like, premiere, like, first day in the theater, that would be. But for me, I've always known that, Darth Vader is Luke's father. At least I've always been conscious of that as far back as I can remember, so I don't really have the experience of it being like a big twist, like, whoa, Darth Vader is Luke's father. But I can imagine back in 1980 seeing that your big villain is the father of the big hero would kind of be. Recently, actually, over the past couple of years, I've actually started showing Star Wars to more people that have never seen it. And the way I usually go is 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, and then if they want to watch the Clone Wars, we usually watch that last.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's an interesting way of looking at it.
Now for the other middle chapter, we have Attack of the Clones, which I'll say this. I understand it's not the best movie, but I don't know. It's a guilty pleasure for me. It's like, yeah, I love this film. I don't know why. I just do.
I think this movie definitely has its downs and its ups. I will say that I do enjoy watching this movie a lot more than I used to. This used to definitely be a bit of a hate watch for me. And in more recent years, there was a lot that I can appreciate about this film. And the prequel trilogy in general, I definitely have a more positive opinion. I would say after the sequel trilogy, maybe.
Yeah, whatever happened with the sequel trilogy, it had people appreciate the prequels more. Kind of like how the new Indiana Jones movie had them have more appreciation for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It's kind of a weird little compare and contrast thing where it's like, oh yeah, these two franchises happened the same way for some reason when it really shouldn't have.
With Attack of the Clones, I think it starts out all right. We got the assassination attempt on Padme, and then after Anakin is on screen, it does get a little bit cringeworthy. We've got some cheesy dialogue, some corny deliveries, but
and we get another Mandalorian in this film too.
Yeah, we get Jango Fett showing up for the first time, and Boba Fett too.
Yeah, Boba Fett. When I was thinking of a backstory for the little guy, it's like, this is not what I expected, that he's a clone.
Yeah, it's a very interesting part of the movie when we have Jango and Boba together. But yeah, there's a lot of really cool moments with this film. I think the lightsaber duels with Christopher Lee as Count Dooku are absolutely incredible. But really the thing that holds this film back for me is the love dialogue between Anakin and Padme. The delivery, I mean, I don't know how much you can place it on the actors and the delivery, because if you really just read the script, it does fall a bit flat in some areas. A bit of a less believable relationship dynamic than you had seen previously in Star Wars.
I mean, at least with like Luke, or not Luke, Leia and Han, that felt somewhat organic in a way. This one kind of felt like it was like, okay, we have to set up the story of the original trilogy somehow, so we're gonna have to like have this two combined together. But yeah, it's like it could have been handled better. I don't blame the actors for this. I would blame the script for it. But anyways, we have one last middle chapter to discuss, which I go back and forth between this one and the movie that followed afterwards as to which one is worse. But right now I'm saying this middle chapter's worse because it caused the third movie to happen. Last Jedi.
Yeah, going into the theater for The Last Jedi, I had very high hopes.
the world had so much high hopes for this one.
Yeah, after The Force Awakens, I was really looking up to this movie, and then even after it finished for the first time, I was like, okay, yeah, that was a really great movie. You know, it really subverted my expectations. But really, from the first time I rewatched it, just a couple months later, yeah, its flaws do become quite apparent to you. I think one of the main things to talk about with this movie is actually Mark Hamill's reaction to the movie and how he talked about this movie in interviews at the time, where he wasn't really satisfied with the direction of Luke Skywalker. He believed that the character had been like rewritten in a way, that the way he acted was sort of unbecoming of Luke Skywalker and how you'd seen him in previous installments, and he didn't really understand what was going on with that character. And I would say that is one of the largest flaws of the movie. But I think, personally, my biggest gripe with the movie in terms of a character that, you know, had maybe wasted potential was actually Finn.
Yeah.
Because The Force Awakens set up a whole lot with Finn.
One problem I had with Finn in this movie is not him specifically, it was his companion Rose.
Yeah.
That was something that was not needed at all. I understand they might have wanted to do like a Lando type character, but this is not it, man.
Yeah, and I think it's weird how Finn needs like a different companion every movie, because the first one, you know, Rey was his companion. The second one, he has Rose. The third one, I don't actually remember what her name was because I've only watched this movie like twice.
Whatever the case, it was also a stormtrooper that left the First Order like he was. That's the only thing that I remember from that set character, and that they ride space horses in that movie. But with this second chapter too, it's like you destroyed so much that you set up in Force Awakens. Like, I'm convinced that Snoke, the Palpatine replacement, the guy who was in golden robes, was meant to be the big bad of the third movie.
Yeah, and then you just kill him off like it's absolutely nothing in this movie. Like, even in this movie, you build him up as this ultra powerful Force user, you know, like this sort of like unbelievable, untouchable, powerful being, and then his apprentice kills him instantly, basically, you know.
Yeah, and what's it called? I'm pretty sure that the Knights, the Red Guardian things that were protecting him, I'm pretty sure those are supposed to be one of like the most strongest forces of the said Empire or the, you know, the First Order, and they die like immediately.
Yeah, and there is a big struggle in that scene, and you know, there's a lot of like a crazy lightsaber and whatever that the weapon they're using is called would be. I'm not exactly sure what that's called, but you know, this scene is very pretty. It looks very nice. I've seen this in many Magnolia rooms at Best Buy playing on the TVs in there, but if you like analyze the choreography, and many people online have done this, you can watch many YouTube videos where they break down the actual fighting choreography. It's complete nonsense. It's just done to make people look cool. You know, you got the big bad assassins trying to take down the people who just killed the supreme leader, and then they're like spinning around and, you know, doing all these ridiculous moves that don't have any tactical advantage. You can just tell they're doing it to look cool, and yeah, I think it's kind of goofy.
One of the other things I don't like about Last Jedi is this movie started the whole connection thing that Rey and Kylo had for the rest of the trilogy, which why?
As it builds up in this movie, I don't think it's as big of a problem as it would become in the next movie, because there's a bit of a genuine chemistry between them. You know, maybe I don't really like. I definitely don't like how it ended up in the next movie. But
what's it called? With this one, I feel like it was building more towards like, oh yeah, we respect each other, not so much. Well, we saw how that ended.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave it there. We're just gonna go into the third chapter of each of these now. Order of release again. Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi.
Return of the Jedi is interesting because I didn't know for the longest time that this one had also a bit of a negative reception with the fans in terms of the original trilogy. At least this is often seen as the worst of the original trilogy.
I just see it as the basic Star Wars film.
I do like it a lot. There are some elements like you know, people bring up they just did the Death Star again. Like how could they be so foolish to just reuse that? And I agree.
This time there's a shield around it that they need to get rid of.
Yeah, it is interesting how they keep reusing the Death Star trope over and over again. Even kind of in Attack of the Clones a bit. But you know, I don't really think of it as that big of an issue. with Return of the Jedi specifically. I think this movie starts out great, where it's kind of where we left off, trying to get Han Solo back from how he was encased in carbonite. So we have that sequence going on in the beginning.
That entire Jabba the Hutt scene, I feel like that's probably the only complaint I have of this one. It just felt a little long to me.
Yeah, it does go on for quite a while, and it does take up a decent chunk of the film. But I do think it's overall enjoyable, especially when they're on the sand barge and that fight breaks out. It gets really entertaining, I think.
Yeah.
I think.
Although we could have used more Boba Fett in the film, you know.
Yes, that is definitely probably the most underused character in the entire trilogy. I think it's funny actually when people talk about the book of Boba Fett. They're like, they damaged the character of Boba Fett so much they turned him into a major softie. And I'm like, what, did you prefer him when he did nothing and was killed by Han Solo by accident in 5 seconds after only having a couple minutes of screen time?
Oh yeah, I would like to say this. It was only after Rise of Skywalker that they stopped making movies. So Book of Boba Fett was supposed to be a movie that we were originally supposed to get in 2020. You could thank The Last Jedi for us being banished to Disney Plus for almost an eternity. I mean, we're barely getting back with Grogu and Mando in a couple of months.
Yeah, I think Return of the Jedi, also with our big bad villain in this one, Palpatine, definitely.
Hey, at least Anakin concluded his story in a way, you know?
Yeah, we have Darth Vader reaching his breaking point, going back to the light side and overthrowing the Emperor. And yeah, I think as a conclusion to this original trilogy, I think it serves as a great point of, finale.
It works.
Yeah.
Something I would like to say too, specifically with Darth Vader, he spent when he was supposed to bring balance to the Force. If you think about it, he kind of did, because he was on the side of light for like 20 years. Then he was on the dark side for 20 years. In a way, it's like you just joined both sides to be balanced on both. And with you taking out the Sith in the end, you did it. Now for what is probably my favorite Star Wars film, Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, now this movie I have a bit of a complicated history with, because, as one of the prequels, it definitely does have some of the flaws of the other two movies, and for a long time I was able to only really see those flaws. I wasn't really able to see the positives of this movie. And I don't know why it is, but I watched this movie, I think, when I rewatched all the Star Wars movies before Rise of Skywalker, and then I never, watched it again after that. I'd seen it many times up to then, probably, 20 times or something. But I just rewatched it for the first time in however many years when it came out in theaters this last year. And my appreciation for this movie has gone way up, and I've watched it a few times since then as well. I think this movie is really great. It is disappointing, though, that there are certain aspects. Reading about like what they had planned for this movie and what they actually had to leave out because of what they could only fit in 2 hours.
And I'm guessing because of the negative reception that the other two films had.
Yeah, but overall, like this movie and let's talk about my favorite parts of this movie, because
Execute Order 66.
Well, my favorite part of this movie would definitely be the lightsaber duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan. It's definitely one of the most epic lightsaber duels of...
It cutting back to Yoda and Palpatine fighting at the same time was like the cherry on top.
Yeah, that part is really funny too. Seeing Yoda, whenever you see Yoda fighting with a lightsaber, jumping around, like doing those gymnastics as he does, I think it's really entertaining to watch.
It's like, man, Master Yoda was really great back in the day.
Yeah, this movie, in terms of its flaws, I do think Anakin's turn is not as explored as it should have been. It does feel like it kind of happens a bit quickly. You see him struggling against like his feelings about Palpatine earlier on. Him struggling with knowing that he's a Sith Lord and how he's going to deal with that information. Mm-hmm. And then he just kills Mace Windu. I feel like that moment happens a little bit too quickly.
Yeah.
But other than that, I do have a lot more of an appreciation for this film.
I mean, we did get a show technically where it like shows us what was going through the mind of Anakin before it led up to this moment.
Yeah.
That being the Clone Wars. And we do even get to see like some repercussions of his mind to other people. A good example would be Ahsoka and Rebels, and then the Bad Batch just watching from afar.
Yeah. So overall, I think while this movie, at the time, didn't exactly get the positive reception that it has now. Certainly, this movie is kind of worshipped by a lot of people today.
Yeah.
I do think that it was a good conclusion to a trilogy that did have a lot of problems, and I think out of all the whole trilogy, I think this one is probably the best.
And what's
by
called,
far.
despite the tragedy that this movie brings to this universe, it's like, yeah, at least the ending sets up literally a new hope for the galaxy.
Yeah, I think that's what the actual like final scene in the movie is called in like the DVD booklet or something.
A
And
New
it's
Hope.
called A New Hope because you see Anakin and Leia
It's like, oh my god, look, baby Luke Skywalker.
and Leia who remembers her mother even though she dies 5
Yeah.
seconds after being born.
It's like, I need to know how you remember that. I saw Obi-Wan Kenobi's TV show. It's like, how do you know that? But yeah, now for a film that a lot of people still haven't forgiven, and I don't at all see defenders for. We have Rise of Skywalker. Here's my main complaint: the title. What do you mean Rise of Skywalker? Why didn't you just go with the original title that was supposed to be Star Wars Duel of the Fates? It was supposed to be named after a soundtrack, but still, that sounds like a better title than whatever this is.
Yeah, I just read about that title Duel of the Fates this morning for the first time, and I do think that is a better title than The Rise of Skywalker. Now, obviously, if you've seen The Rise of Skywalker, you probably know what that title implies based on the
ending.
final scene of the movie, but honestly, most people are not really a big fan of that scene or that implication, myself kind of included. I mean,
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, I'm Rey Skywalker, and it's like, you're Rey Palpatine to me. You're not gonna be Skywalker.
I think my biggest issue with that scene is the way it's written and acted out when she says, "Who are you?" and then she's like, "I'm Rey," and then the lady's like, "Rey who?" It's like, oh, well, that's a great setup for this next line, isn't it?
How it should have ended, did something kind of funny with that scene, because the whole How It Should Have Ended channel decided to do a bit where it's like, I'm Rey who? Revenge of the Sith, and it's like, oh heck yeah, I would have preferred that ending.
Yeah,
But this movie is just all over the place, man. It's like we go to, I want to say it was Mustafar in like the opening with Kylo. He gets the whatever the Sith Wayfinder, I think it's called, goes and finds Palpatine.
I don't remember where that the movie opens up. Was it Dathomir or something like that? I don't know. But
I
he
don't
gets the Sith Wayfinder, and then he goes on a journey to find the new Palpatine, and like the explanation we get at the time that Palpatine himself says is just the recycled line from Episode 3, which is, you know, the dark side is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. But
another complaint I have. This is a complaint that people had where it's like, oh, they keep reusing the Death Star trope. Now they use it again on one of those giant ships that they usually fly around in. Although this time we have Death Star lasers attached to them, which are capable of killing a planet.
yeah.
One question, if you blow up the planet in like close proximity, wouldn't the ship like be in that asteroid field after you destroy the planet?
Yeah, the debris field. I know,
Yeah.
like the Death Star had to have a hyperdrive to get away from like Alderaan immediately after blowing it up and whatnot. But I think my biggest gripes with this film really is Rey's character and her interactions with Leia, especially. Carrie Fisher unfortunately
She passed away at the
before.
time, and the excuse they give, they're like, digitally recreating her was not an option. We grabbed the footage from Force Awakens and put her in here. We redressed her in CGI, but nothing much. And you watch this trilogy and you're like, she went from looking old to very old in the second movie, and now back to younger old. This doesn't, no. Just, no.
Yeah, I think overall, like, it's honestly amazing they were able to come up with anything remotely cohesive with her story in this movie, which it's not fully. I say remotely because it is remotely cohesive. It's not fully there. I think when Rey says that she needs to confront Kylo Ren, and then Leia's just like, no. It's like, what does that mean?
Yeah. And then, what's it called? The one scene that I want to talk about that just came out of nowhere. The kiss scene.
Yes. I remember, like, ever since The Force Awakens came out, you'd go on Instagram and you'd see these, like, 13-year-old fangirl accounts of Star Wars, and they would be talking about, like, how they ship Reylo, and you're just like, oh, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
You get to the last movie and you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, they did sort of bring up like a chemistry, some sort of friendship, mutual respect between them in the previous film when they have that Force link or whatever. And, you know, it is a bit believable there. You know, they do have sort of similar situations. You know, you can believe that they would have some sort of kinship there. But when they actually, like, full-on make out in this movie, I mean, it comes out of nowhere.
The funniest thing is that they do that. Kylo Ren immediately just dies afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's like...
And the thing, what's it called? One other thing to add about that. They had established in this movie, because this came out around the same time that the first season of Mandalorian came out, with little Baby Yoda doing the hand little thing where he heals people. It's like, couldn't you have healed Kylo Ren in that moment, but just chose not to?
I think what happens is she does heal Kylo Ren at some point in that movie. I don't remember exactly.
She healed him when she stabbed him with his own lightsaber. Then he healed her. But it's like, wait, what did you do? Give your life force to her? Or,
yeah, like doing
what happened there?
The back and forth thing there. I thought that was kind of ridiculous. But yeah, I don't feel like Kylo Ren really redeemed himself in the same way that a character like Anakin Skywalker would at the end of Return of the Jedi, where that definitely feels more impactful than anything Kylo did to turn back to the light side at the end of this.
Even with
film.
Obi-Wan in the prequel trilogy, I would say too, he had like a much better story than whatever Kylo Ren had. And I want to say this too: Kylo Ren is like the only one in the sequel trilogy who comes close to having a complete arc in this film, or just like in all of these three films combined.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things that is definitely talked about a lot, specifically by John Boyega, the actor, is Finn's character and how his arc was genuinely abandoned after the first film. Because if you watch The Force Awakens...
I want to say he said that he was meant to become a Jedi by the end of it.
I mean, if you watch The Force Awakens, they build up so much about his character that is never fully explored or just never talked about ever again after this one movie. Because you have him... leaving the stormtroopers, obviously that's a very interesting concept that one of our main heroes used to be a stormtrooper, and aside from in this first movie, it's not really that deeply explored. And then you have him picking up the lightsaber multiple times in this film. I think that's the main thing that people talk about. Well, they're setting up this character to be force sensitive is whenever he's holding the lightsaber.
I mean, we do have like some little payoff in Rise of Skywalker because he feels when Rey dies originally.
Yeah.
But even then, it's like, you're doing this now.
after we had this whole trilogy where
it's
you
like,
could have explored
you
that.
completely ignored that for the last film. You completely ignored it for most of this one. And now you have him doing this.
Plus, I feel like his chemistry with Rey is the most genuine chemistry that you see in this entire series. Like, if they got together in the end, that would have made a lot more sense to me. There's a whole lot of stuff in The Force Awakens that you see between them where it makes sense that they would have that sort of, admiration for each other. There's even deleted scenes.
Bro even was about to say I love you right before sinking into the sand.
Yeah, and then there's deleted scenes where like Finn gives Rey his jacket when they're on the Starkiller base, and I just think it's interesting. They cut all that stuff out of the film, and then in the end, Rey and Kylo Ren become a thing. It made no sense to me.
Yeah. And then one other thing that kind of confused me is the scene specifically with Rey and Kylo, where the Knights of Ren are surrounding him, and then Rey decides to put the lightsaber behind her. And then you cuts back to Kylo pulling out that same lightsaber. And I'm like, when was this established? I need to know. They even had like a battle in that weird little zone where it's like they're fighting, but like they're not really there in the room with each other.
Yeah. Looking back, this movie is definitely...
There's a reason why no one rewatches it willingly, unless if it's for things to talk about, I guess.
Yeah, there's a whole lot about this movie that you can appreciate a whole lot about this movie still. I do think overall there are some things that it does better than The Last Jedi, but as a finale for the not only just the trilogy,
But
but also
for-
the entire Skywalker saga, the entire series up to this point, it really does fall flat as a conclusion. It really brings back a lot of things that shouldn't be brought back. Doesn't have enough of its original ideas.
Another complaint I would say is you throw in some characters that we should not be introducing at this point. It's like we have that girl with the golden helmet with the red outfit, and I don't know who that is. I don't remember who that is. You have the one other girl who's with Finn for some reason in this movie, and it's like I don't know who that is either. And then you have the return of Lando, but that's come on, man, it's Lando. He's of course people are gonna love that.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the big nostalgia farming moments of this movie when Lando comes back. He's in disguise just like he was in.
I find it
Return
funny
of the
that
Jedi.
what's it called? I find it funny that they also fed into the fan service and gave Chewie a medal at the end.
Yeah, I do think that's really funny, and I think man, the way they treated Chewbacca in this trilogy was really strange. I think a lot of his scenes were really good, but there were a lot of moments, especially after Han Solo passed away.
You could see in Force Awakens when Han Solo dies, he is literally in distraught and is going in to kill Kylo Ren.
Yeah, he's in rage mode. He shoots Kylo. That scene's actually, pretty well.
It's like, man, I felt that for Chewbacca.
Yeah, but my main gripe is that Leia goes to hug Rey after that happens. Like Han Solo dies, and then they get back to the planet, and then she goes in for the hug with Rey as Chewbacca walks past them. It's like, what?
Yeah, it's like that should be Chewie hugging her, not.
You met Rey yesterday, the day before, maybe, and then.
No, actually, that would be the first time they canonically meet, because Rey gets taken she gets taken by Kylo Ren. So them hugging is canonically the first time that they actually see each other face to face. And another complaint I have is shouldn't Leia go with Rey to find Luke?
Yeah, I don't know why she goes alone, like this person that he's never met. It's just gonna show up on this island where she is.
It was funny when Chewbacca knocked the door down though in the second movie, and he's like, Chewie, wait,
Yeah.
where's Han?
Where's Han? That scene was kind of weird.
Cuts straight to the villains. And it's like, here we go again. And then in this one, it's like, I feel like it should have just been Lando and Chewie teaming up the entire, or those two characters should have had more of a role with each other.
I almost forgot my entire least favorite part of this movie, by far, is when General Hux reveals he's the spy.
Yeah,
What?
I forgot about that.
What? You're telling me that this
Great
guy...
meme potential for the line that he says, but still, it's like, I don't care if they win. I just want to see Kylo lose. And it's like,
This is the guy who gave that allegory Nazi speech in the first movie.
in the first one that
the
people...
entire thing is designed
Yeah.
to look like a Hitler rally, and then in this movie he's like, yeah, I've actually never been that into the First Order. I've been slighted by Kylo Ren.
What's it called? I do have a teacher that I had in high school. He is a massive Star Wars fan. Our school name was Millennium, and he purposely put Falcons for the theme of the school. We have a football team and all other sports team called the Millennium Falcons. He's a real one for that, but he went into the behind the scenes of everything Star Wars, and he was like, yeah, they took all these names and stuff from Germany and stuff just to make the Empire sound bad, because that's what was bad, and still is. So that's a little cool thing, and it's that was probably one of the funniest things that they could have done for Force Awakens, pay homage to something that was an idea for inspiration, I guess.
Yeah, it's just kind of like wearing your influences on your sleeve a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think The Rise of Skywalker...
I thought, what's it called? They could have gone all the way and had a red sleeve on one of the guys with the Empire's logo on it.
Isn't that like something that some of the people in those movies have? They have a little insignia.
They have the insignia, but they just don't have the sleeve. If they wanted it to be really on the nose, they could have just had the sleeve on there.
Yeah. Just disappointing finale to the series. Unfortunate that it turned out this way.
Yeah.
I will say that after my most recent rewatch, I do have a greater appreciation for The Force Awakens. I do remember that I liked that movie quite a bit when it came out, and I just wish that the things it was building up to actually paid out correctly.
Yeah, and what's it called? I'll say this to close it off. There's this other trilogy. It's called the Halloween Blumhouse trilogy. We have Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. It has the same exact situation with what happened with this Star Wars trilogy. You have a good one that's good enough. You have the second one where people are questioning, like, okay, sure, we can go with this. And then you have the final film where it's like, oh my god, you guys did not plan this out at all.
Yeah.
And specifically, at least with Halloween Ends and Rise of Skywalker, for me, it has, for some reason, those two movies have an effect where it's like, I don't even want to watch the first one anymore because I know where it's going to lead.
I think it's just very, very much essential to have a plan with what you're going to do when you have a beginning, a middle, and an end in a trilogy.
Story.
Because I feel like, J.J. Abrams was given the first movie, and then he's like, all right, I'm going to set up all this stuff.
Apparently, he wanted to do the sequel, too. He wanted to do the entire trilogy. They only gave him the first and the last film.
Yeah, I remember when it was originally announced, they had like 3 different directors that were going to do the 3 different films. So it was J.J. Abrams for the first one, Rian Johnson for the second one, and then I don't remember.
The third one was the guy who did the first and the first and the third Jurassic World film. I don't remember his name, but all I can say is that Jurassic World 1 is good. Don't watch the third one.
I'm pretty sure he quit. He quits like because of what happened with the Last Jedi.
Because of what happened with the Last Jedi.
Yeah, he's like, I can't work with the story anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, they brought back J.J. Abrams, and then J.J. Abrams, who had ideas that he wanted to sort of explore with the entire trilogy, but as he wasn't directing them, he couldn't explore them. Now that he's given the third film, he's like, oh, now I can sort of go back into it a bit.
Yeah, a good example of like working together, especially for like a story like this, we have something called the Monsterverse. Kong Skull Island, Godzilla King of Monsters, and Godzilla vs. Kong were all announced like back to back, where it's like, yeah, we could technically have these as sequels as each other. But behind the scenes, the directors were actively working with each other just so they can set up Godzilla vs. Kong. Whether you liked it or didn't, at least there was like that cohesion where it's like, okay, yeah, I can see this taking place in the same world. You have stuff that's set up in these films that pay off by the time we get to Godzilla vs. Kong. So if we had something like that, it would have been much better.
Yeah, and I feel like these Star Wars movies, the sequel trilogy in particular, are the most like one follows after the other than any of the other previous trilogies in Star Wars. Like, these movies are designed to lead into the next one, whereas the other ones, it always seems like there's a bit of time in between them. These movies, it seems like it's like just one after the other.
So one after the other. I mean, like, yeah, Last Jedi and Force Awakens, obviously supposed to be back to back. Rise of Skywalker is the only one that has like that
in between, I think.
That has like a breather room of a year.
Yeah,
but it's like maybe
but I feel like with how closely these films are like back to back together, they feel the most disconnected and disjointed from the previous trilogies. Like, they each feel like their own.
And they came out close together. It's like, what?
Yeah, they definitely didn't have as big of a gap as the other films. I think it was 2 years in between each film, whereas 3 years had become the standard for Star Wars by that point.
Yeah, but yeah, pretty much. That's pretty much all the trilogies that we covered. Which would you say is your favorite trilogy of all 3 of these?
I think the original trilogy still stands as my favorite trilogy of them all. Just
that one was probably told the best. I would say that right under it is the prequels, where it's like, it may not have been good, but at least they had a plan.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot more appreciation for the prequels, not only just after watching the sequels, also watching them in theaters recently. I haven't seen episode 2 in theaters yet, but watching those episode 1 and episode 3 re-releases were incredible experiences.
Yeah, and then obviously the sequel trilogy is just on everyone's bottom tier list.
I will say that I do enjoy them more the second time that I've watched them, because I'd actually never seen The Rise of Skywalker since I'd seen it in the theater. And after I left the theater, I just didn't know what to feel. I didn't know what to think about the series at all.
Yeah.
I think more so watching it the second time around, I've come to terms with what's happened. I've accepted what's happened, even if it's not my favorite.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's stuff to enjoy in all the films at least.
But anyways, that's probably it. Thank you, Ian, for being a part of this podcast episode.
Thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure to talk about Star Wars with you.
Yeah, and maybe you guys will see him again for a future episode. We do have 4 more of these things afterwards.
Thank you for joining us on the 5th episode of the Storytelling Podcast on What Makes a Story Bad here on Delta College. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back here on 93.5 KWDC.
The more you listen to your kids, the closer you'll be. So we asked kids, what do you want your parents to hear?
I feel sometimes that I'm not listened to. I would just want you to listen to me more often and evaluate situations with me and lead me towards success.
We're not adults, so just be there and listen. I just want someone to yap to. And I just feel like I'll be fine if someone just hears me talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk.
You're doing a really good job. And I don't think I tell you that enough. And I know sometimes we get into it and it's just hard on both of us. But try to understand me more and I'll try to do the same.
Listening is a form of love. Find resources to help you support your kids and their emotional well-being at sounditouttogether.org. That's sounditouttogether.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and Pivotal.
Well, everyone, that's going to be it for this podcast episode on the Storytelling Podcast, where we dived into what makes a story bad. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast and joining us on this podcast episode of the Storytelling Podcast. I would like to give a massive shout out to Ian for being a guest on this episode of the Storytelling Podcast, where we discussed the sequel trilogy of Star Wars and why it had been considered a bad story to many people, myself included. I want to take a moment to thank you all for listening to this episode of the Storytelling Podcast. Your time and support truly does mean a great deal to me, and I hope today's discussion gave you something useful to take with you into your own creative work. Be sure to join us next time on the Storytelling Podcast, where we'll be continuing to build and dive even deeper into the art of storytelling. Give you all a little tease for what's to come in the very next episode following this one. For all those who are a big fan of video games out there, you're not going to want to miss this one that's coming up, because it's going to be something special. Thank you all again for listening, and I will catch you all next time. See you guys. The Storytelling Podcast has been a production of KWDC 93.5 LPFM, Delta College Radio. This program is made possible by listeners like you. Programming is produced by the students, staff, and faculty of San Joaquin Delta College's Digital Media Department and supported by the Delta College Department of Arts and Multimedia, the Career Technical Education and Workforce Development Office, and the state of California. Thank you for listening.